Smith. I'm Brooks Melchior from Los Angeles. We do this every weekday at noon Eastern time. And this is our wheelhouse day. As wheelhouse a day as there is for what we do here at Sports by Brooks. And the stuff that's out there today, which is huge. There's multiple huge stories. Huge. When I say huge, I mean stuff that will affect what you're going to see on the field in the future. I'll guarantee it. And people will be talking about it as a big deal in the future. But right now, they're not talking about it. Not right, but so we're going to get you ahead of the game, and we're going to give you details on what's going on. And we've got two great guests, that being Ken Carman coming up. He covers the Cleveland Browns for 92.3 The Fan in Cleveland. Probably the only guy in sports media who actually is kind of associated with the team. I think he does some of their pre and post for their broadcasts and actually tells the truth. And I mean, he tells the truth. When I say tells the truth, he's very assertive sometimes, and that just doesn't happen. And it really hasn't happened that much at all in history. But Ken Carman's one of those guys. So he's going to tell us what he really thinks of Paul DePodesta in the situation. Trust me, he will. Jimmy Haslam. So we'll talk about that. And then also, and I was just saying this to Cam Smith, of all the people we've had on, I don't know, we're probably close to 200 people. And we've had big names, right? If I could name one person who covers a team, covers a region, right? Writes columns and things like that, who has great information, right, that nobody else has. And when you ask him a question about something that everybody else is speculating on everywhere else, he has an answer. This is what's happening. That's John McClain of the Houston Chronicle. And he's coming up at the top of the hour. So we are going to get the scoop on the Houston Texans, period. He covers the Texans. We're also going to get the scoop on Matt Rule, exactly what happened with Matt Rule leaving Baylor, because John is actually one of the top guys who knows a lot about Baylor football. So with Rule leaving and John being an NFL guy, perfect timing. And Cam Smith, our producer, Cam, I just heard from Robert Littell. Cam, if you could give Robert a shout, and we could try to I said we're going to have Ken coming up at 12:20, so maybe we could talk about having Robert on at perhaps 12:40, or of course we're going to have John McClain on at 1:00. Maybe we could try Robert at 1:30. Whatever works for him, but we want to have Robert Littell on of Black Sports Online at TMZ Sports, because one of these big stories I've been talking about is the hazing lawsuit that's been filed against Penn State by a former Penn State player. Ugly allegations. Robert Littell, of course, at TMZ Sports and Black Sports Online. If you don't know, Robert is now a TV star on TMZ Sports every night on Fox Sports 1, FS1. And so they're reporting on the story that, of course, they broke. It takes them to break it. And there are some Sandusky references in this story. It's ugly. And it's a high profile situation in that James Franklin was told about the situation, did nothing. Penn State basically did nothing. And but it's going to be going to court. And when I looked at ESPN's homepage before I came on the show, just to double check, because I didn't see anything about this story on ESPN, nothing on ESPN.com. So what I want to do is, before I run down anything, Cam, I don't know if you're on the phone or what the story is, but if you could bring up, we've got a couple of reports from news outlets in Pennsylvania who are actually covering this enormous story involving James Franklin, the hazing lawsuit by a player invoking Jerry Sandusky. The players on the team invoked Jerry Sandusky as they were hazing this player. That's the allegation. Penn State covers it up, does nothing. If you could, when you get a chance, run one of those reports, and so we can kind of drill down.
Well, good evening. A former Penn State football player is suing Penn State University along with head coach James Franklin and a former teammate.
The suit alleges multiple acts of hazing and harassment by a number of different players, some who are still on the team. We have live coverage on this developing story. First, we're going to go to our Evan Hinckley, who looked through the entire lawsuit. So, Evan, what kind of details did you find out?
Good evening, John, Amanda. The 46-page lawsuit has some serious allegations of hazing, some of it sexual in nature, which they claim was committed not just against one former Penn State football player, but multiple underclassmen. A lawsuit filed Monday by 20-year-old Isaiah Humphreys through the office of Philadelphia lawyer Stephen Marino says beginning in January of 2018, current players Damian Barber, Micah Parsons, Jesse Luketa, and NFL hopeful Yetur Gross-Matos orchestrated a campaign to harass and haze lower-classmen as a form of initiation into Penn State football. Humphreys says the group made threats, including they would, quote, make underclassmen their expletive because this is a prison, and said, quote, I am going to expletive you. Humphreys also claims they would say to underclassmen, quote, I am going to Sandusky you, and quote, this is Jerry. It wasn't just verbal. Humphreys says the underclassmen would wrestle players to the ground, pretend to sexually assault them, and put their genitals on the underclassmen's faces while they were held down. Some of the other sexual conduct is too graphic to broadcast. All of this, the suit claims, happened in the Lash building along with the campus dorm and other places in the county.
Scene of the crime.
The suit says coaches observed the harassment in the locker room and that Humphreys reported it to them. The civil complaint goes on to say that Humphreys' father, Leonard, a former PSU and NFL player, reported the hazing directly to James Franklin and other football leadership, but that no substantial action was taken. In May of 2019, PSU's Office of Sexual Misconduct received an anonymous complaint of this harassment and hazing. That office investigated, but Humphreys says the football team concealed the hazing during the investigation. The suit says Penn State submitted its findings to PSU Student Conduct, which determined Barber violated Student Code of Conduct and charged him with assault and hazing. Now, in response to this suit, we reached out to Penn State, who gave us in part the following statement, which reads, quote, Penn State police investigated related allegations and forwarded the results of that investigation to the Office of the Center County District Attorney. The DA reviewed the case and decided that no charges would be pursued. And again, this suit seeks damages unspecified in nature and also a jury trial, again, in this civil suit. Coming up tonight, 6, we'll have more on what Humphreys says happened to him in terms of actions, alleged actions, after he reported this alleged hazing.
So that gives you a pretty good rundown, and we're going to just tweeting something out here, and we're also going to talk with, I hope, Robert Littell, who is one of the guys who has broken this entire story. Story pretty much wouldn't exist with one of the guys that we're going to be speaking with of TMZ Sports and BSO, and so that'll be coming up. But since nobody else is covering it except what we just showed you, there's some other news out. We have a couple of other reports, but we'll stick with that one. But it's in the context of Sandusky, in the context of the players allegedly invoking Sandusky, right? I mean, if you're the young player who's now at Cal, if you are that guy, I can't thank that guy enough. You talk about courage, because the environment that he is in, whether it's in school to try to take advantage of getting a degree and all the things that go along with that as he moves on with his life, and now he's at Cal, which is a great place, institution, reputation, but of course he's also trying to play to make the NFL. Every single player is, and the reason is, in their mind at least, that's how coaches recruit, period. So with that in mind, for this lawsuit to come about, and knowing that, let's face it, the NFL is a blackball culture. Sports is a blackball culture where if you do something that maybe causes a problem for James Frank, Penn State coach or whatever, you're blackballed. You're done. Nick Saban does it at Alabama as much as anybody. And this is a secret that it's not a secret on this show, how he oversigns and oversigns and oversigns classes and then just cuts players. And he tells them when he cuts them, I will place you at another school. No problem. As long as you don't say that I cut you, whatever the cover story is. The player wanted to transfer. He wasn't getting the playing time. He was hurt, this, that, and the other. Well, that's not always the case when guys leave Alabama. Sometimes they're cut like NFL players, sometimes being several times a year at Alabama. That's how it works, gray shirty. And that's why Alabama is at the top of the heap in college football, because he does that more than anybody else, really, and better than anybody else. Yeah, he's a professional coach, a NFL coach, as far as I'm concerned. At Alabama, if the closest thing to the NFL probably is Alabama. So that's the difference, and I've gone through it before. But but in terms of the blackball stuff that I was telling you about in relation to this lawsuit, right? For this young man to do this is really, really courageous. And really, really, really valuable in lieu of Jerry Sandusky and what took place there. And this isn't the first situation that's popped up and a lawsuit that's popped up against Penn State and Franklin. He's also been dealing with players accusing him of rushing them back from injury in public. These are public accusations going on. So this is nothing new, obviously, at Penn State, and nothing new for Franklin. And perhaps USC, well, they dodged a bullet because he was, as we reported here, really the only guy that Carol Folt seriously considered for the SC job. And he played USC. To his credit, he's a Pennsylvania guy. He wants to stay at Penn State. This is his destination job, unless he's going to go to the NFL. In the best case scenario. So he played USC, as coaches do every 5 seconds when they're scaring around for jobs. And that's what you do in the business. That's cool. But USC may have actually dodged a bullet. And as everybody at USC will excitedly tell you, the last, 36 hours has been an incredible 36. They're dancing in the streets down here in the South Bay where we're doing the show from right now. This is USC country, as you can see right behind me. But Steve Lopes, who is a long time at USC now, Steve Lopes is a long-time athletic department official at USC, 35 years. And he was, the way things have worked until Mike Bohn was hired, for basically forever, as long as I've been here, 20 years, USC has hired high-profile football alumni, Mike Garrett, Pat Hayden, Lynn Swann, to be the athletic director, right? Those guys were not an athletic director as we understand it. They were not involved in the day-to-day operation. They were there for public relations and to raise money. That's it. Now, they'll claim that they were doing things. They weren't. We know that because the guy who was running the athletic department was Steve Lopes, the guy who was just fired. And now we finally get a real AD in Mike Bohn, at least as it's defined in the industry. And what happens? Steve Lopes suddenly, after 35 years, is gone. But that's not the whole story. That's not the sole reason he was fired. He was fired in part because he was someone who was, involved. Well, he allegedly has been involved in the college admissions scandal. We'll see how that plays out. This story was broken yesterday by the Los Angeles Times, and the college admissions scandal is really cited as the only pretense as to why he was fired, right? No specifics, all vague. And Lord knows if he somehow is involved with Rick Singer in that scandal, and you're talking about a guy who was running the athletic department, even though he was the number 2 all those years, right? USC is in deep doo-doo if he's involved with Rick Singer. Now, so for them to say he was involved, and that's why we're fired, very interesting. I guess we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But, and perhaps it's a coincidence, but he also happened to be the one guy outside, and guy, Carol Folt is a woman, and she's the brand new president at USC. So today, Clay Helton has his job because of 2 people, Carol Folt and Steve Lopes. Lopes was fired yesterday, the guy we're talking about. And so Steve Lopes was the only guy in the USC athletic department who supported Clay Helton. Why is that? I'm going to tell you exactly why. And it's pretty gross. And more likely the reason that he was fired after we visit with Ken Carman and we go up to Cleveland and talk to him right now. Thank God, because I'm trying to make sense of the Browns. The Browns are as hard to figure out as, and now everybody cares about the Browns because, well, they got a lot of talent. They got OBJ there, right? That's why I'm calling you, Ken. How's it going?
I cannot. Okay. During a break today, my co-host was asking me about USC. Is that my thing? Okay, there it is. Okay. My co-host was asking me about USC, and I go, because I said I was coming on with you, and I said the last time we talked, you set me straight on a lot of USC stuff, and I think you ended up being right about it. Because I was wondering, I go, well, why can't they do this and this and this and this and this? And I go, man, they're in a kind of a mess. They should be in a much stronger position than what they're at.
Well, it's bizarre. But after yesterday, and what I'm going to tell you right now, because I was just leading up to, but I'll tell you exactly real fast what's going on. Steve Lopes was the guy running USC athletics. They had Lynn Swan, Mike Garrett, Pat Hayden. They were there for fundraising. They weren't real athletic directors. Mike Bone is a real athletic director. So he has come in, and now Steve Lopes, who had been running the athletic department, is number 2 to Mike Bone. And now Steve Lopes, after 35 years at SC, is gone. He's fired. And one of the reasons is Clay Helton has his job today because of 2 people. The brand new president, Carol Folt, who is very powerful right now in wielding that power and insisting that they keep Helton. But Helton would still probably not be there without Steve Lopes, because Steve Lopes is the guy. He really is the reason Helton kept his job, and he really has been running athletics. So why don't we know about him? Well, the reason is Matt Lopes, his son, was given a scholarship by Clay Helton on the football team, even though Matt Lopes, Steve Lopes' son, had no business getting a football scholarship and wouldn't have even had to pay for tuition at USC because his father worked there. But he was given a scholarship, and now Matt Lopes is on the coaching staff.
That's
right?
That's a Mary Laughlin situation you got going on over there.
Right. So, and so that gives you a little taste of what's happening. But essentially, it's been mentioned that Lopes was part of the college admissions scandal and cited, as a vagary as to why he was fired.
Yeah.
I can tell you, if that's the case, and you're talking about he was running athletics, that would be a catastrophe if he's involved. So we'll see how it plays out. But now you know the scoop, Ken.
That's amazing. Because I was thinking about this on the Saturday show. I said, God, they should really be one of those schools that are it's a better situation than you're going to find in the NFL. And it's like, God.
Yeah. I mean, to me, I mean, it's there are other things. We talked about it before about all the problems at the school, which plays a huge role. And that's why Carol Folt, and that's why she right now, as a college president in this situation, has an unusual amount of power because she's been entrusted in firing everybody and controlling things. So, but that's the story. And equally as confusing, it's funny because if you were to make a comparison in pro sports or the NFL to this riddled enigma Winston Churchill quote of an operation in sports like USC, it would be the Browns. Because to me, one of the more fascinating stories that has been playing out over the last couple of years is Paul DePodesta. And the fact that, like Steve Lopes, kind of, Nobody really knows what's going on. A lot of people don't know he's there. And so tell us about the Browns coaching situation and Dee Podesta and that role and where Haslam is on that.
Well, it's a bit of a long story, just because.
Take your time.
Well,
go ahead.
It starts, gosh, about 4 or 5 years ago now. And the worst part about it is that if you're going to do it, you got to go the whole way. And they didn't go the whole way. And it put John Dorsey in a bad situation. John Dorsey didn't do himself any favors. I mean, I think that we should all realize just how important head coaching hires are, because if Freddie Kitchens doesn't get hired, if he doesn't make the mistakes that he makes, and I love Freddie. I love Freddie. He's a good guy. I mean that sincerely. But he was overmatched. And if you don't make the decisions that he makes, then John Dorsey's still in charge. And that means that Paul Dee Podesta is probably gone, because right now Paul Dee Podesta is not working with a contract. He's staying on. Yeah.
Why do they have? How does the Moneyball guy, the baseball guy, end up there? What happened? And why is he there?
He's originally, he's originally a football guy, and so he gets involved in baseball because to them numbers are numbers. No, data is data, and they can use it. And even though they're different sports, and I think the reliance on teammates is completely different. Numbers are numbers, and that's the way it helps. So he's a smart person who's brought into a situation where the Browns have needed smart people for a long time. So he's given this power, and they're going to do something a couple of years ago that's revolutionary. They're going to tank it out, get the number 1 pick. They're going to put themselves in a position where they are going to switch everything out. Well, they basically gave up on that halfway through. They had a 1-15 year, then they had 0-16. They never thought they were going to be 0-16.
Was that Dee Podesta, the 0-16? I mean, was he a force in that?
Yeah, because Sashi Brown's part of it too. But they told everybody in the world, and it's really what the Dolphins are doing right now. I mean, Chris Greer is a mass draft picks, and I tell any Dolphins fan that listens on a Saturday or whenever they're listening, I go, I know you can subscribe to it, but it is a dangerous thing because apathy sets in. And that's a scary. You can be mad at your franchise and things like that as a fan, but apathy will set in. And for the fan base, that's a scary scenario. For the owners, that was terrifying. Because they didn't think they were going to go they knew they were going to take it on the chin in 16. They didn't have any idea they were going to follow up with less wins in 2017. So they do that. They bring in John Dorsey. They trust John Dorsey to use the draft picks. The worst thing that John did was that John hired Freddie, because John is a guy who gets talent. He acquires talent. He knows talent. And some of the guys didn't work out, but he acquires talent. Well, Antonio Callaway is a talented player that's troubled. Chad Thomas is a talented player, but he needs coaching. They bring these guys in. If you don't have a strong coach from the outside, you're going to get ran over. And that's what happened with Freddie Kitchens. Freddie Kitchens was a well-liked assistant, well-liked by the staff, should say well-liked by the players. They bump him up. Well, now you're putting him in a position where he has to be a disciplinarian. If he got hired by the Washington Redskins, I have every intention that it would work out better with Freddie Kitchens. But since he was one person in 1 year, and then he has to, it's just simple, he has to be a different person the next year. Work out. And it didn't work out. And in the end, I think that's what ended up costing John Dorsey. So they go back to, this guy's been here for a long time. This guy's a smart guy. We're going to see this way through. So now it's a scary scenario of, you went through the changes. You brought in talent. They do have some talented players. It's amazing. I think their odds, and I know that odds don't set anything for crying out loud, but they're still 33-1 to go to the Super Bowl next year. So they got talent. Some people believe in them. The quarterback was awful this last season, but there's still something in there with that guy. So now they have to figure out a guy who's going to take them further. They're hoping it's Kevin Stefanski because they were hot on Kevin Stefanski last year. It's just a simple fact is not a lot of people trust it, but not a lot of fans trust it, but they have to see it through. And for Paul Dee Podesta, it's relying on him, but they need to put whoever they can find, put them in the best position possible to have this football team to succeed and actually see the thing through. So if it goes 8-8 next year, I'm going to be upset. I'm an emotional guy, and I'm sure I'll say some things that are completely out of certain orifices, and that's wrong. But they still need to stick to this. They need to do what's best by their franchise, because if they do it over again, it's going to be a bigger mess than they've ever had in their entire lives while they've ran the organization. They cannot afford to do this again. They can't do this again. What they have they have to stick with and hope that it goes the right way. But we can't be doing this again next January. I cannot scream that enough to as many people as enough. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So how you put together the Dorsey, Freddie Kitchens dynamic and laid it all out until now, I still didn't really understand why Dorsey was fired, ultimately. And it's a two-part story. It's that he wanted a guy he could control.
Yeah.
Let's face it. I mean, that's ridiculous. It's like Gettleman, in my opinion, with Joe Judge. It's like the Cowboys. It's not that different.
I made this. I swear to God, I made the same comparison. I go. They traded one wide receiver to another team. The other one took picks. They both took quarterbacks that people question. I got nothing against Daniel Jones. It's way too early. I'm not going to say these nasty things about Daniel Jones because I'll sit there and I'll make excuses for the youth of Baker Mayfield, whatever. So I'm certainly not going to take shots at him. Both have talented running backs. Both have questionable offensive line. They're the same guy. They're the same general manager. You question it, but you're right. But your heart is right. If John hires Josh McDaniels last year, which he wasn't going to do because of the Colts thing, and he's friends with Chris Ballard, if he hires Mike McCarthy last year, who knows what people think of Baker Mayfield? Who knows what people think of the Browns? Who knows where the Browns are at right now? I mean, they did make a run until they lost the last 3 in a row. They did make a run back to the wild card contention when they were on their ass. And they won 3 in a row and then 4 of 5, and then it completely fizzled because they didn't have respect of each other. They didn't have respect of the coach, and they're young. And so when you tank it out before and you put so much young talent on the team and you don't have many veterans that can lead, your quarterback's not going to be that guy, not yet. You're going to run into a problem. And they gave Baker Mayfield as much power as Aaron Rodgers had. And you can't do it.
Right.
He was there, and then it blew up right in their face.
So let me lay this out real quick because I'm still thinking about Dorsey, and I think that's an important thing to think about because right now we're going to talk about the front office in a second. What the hell is going on? Mm-hmm. But with Dorsey, when he hired Kitchens, everybody knew, at least initially after he had been in the job for a while, how overmatched he was. So isn't everybody inside the organization from players on up saying, hey, John, fix it. Mm-hmm. If you're not going to fire the guy, bring people in who can run a meeting or do something. John, it's on you.
Yeah.
Right. You got to do something. If you're not going to fire him, if you're not going to, that's why he was fired because, or that's what I'm asking you. Everybody's looking at Dorsey. Okay, fine. This guy's a disaster and you're not going to fire him. Fine. We'll do something, internally. Bring some people in or figure it out. Do you think that played a role?
Yeah. But I also think that John lost the trust of the ownership. And
well, that's why. I mean, that was a big part of it.
I mean, because if you Jimmy Haslam and Jimmy's the owner, and so everybody should go after the owner because the guy who owns the team, that's where it always ends anyway. So I'm not going to sit there and make a bunch of excuses for him. Okay. But I've said it a bunch of times. Hell, if I was Jimmy Haslam, I'd be just as paranoid as he is. I'd be even more paranoid. And I'm going, I gave you everything that you possibly wanted. I got this guy over here that I trust, but I put him over in the corner for you. And you hired.
He's not on site. Deep Podesta's in California, right?
But even when he's there, it's like, okay, you stay away from John because there was contempt. There was contempt.
Right.
Because the problem with Paul, and it's not a problem. It's the problem that Paul faces is. And I call him by his first name. I don't know him very well. I've only met him a handful of times. I barely see him. And that's why it was important for him to talk yesterday, but that's another thing. He is, you mentioned baseball. He's known as a baseball guy no matter what. He is not very visible with the fan base. A bunch of people said they always think he looks like Jonah Hill. He's actually in great shape. So people just think he's Jonah Hill. So he comes from a different sport. His success is in a different sport. That's immediately going to rub the NFL guys wrong. Yeah, Hill Brooks, you know this better than me. They are as paranoid as anybody you're going to find, NFL people. So even though they use analytics, it can be the very same analytics that Paul DePodesta uses for all we know, and probably is. The guys who came up with the stats and the analytics and what they use to help them make decisions, those guys came up in the NFL. They were smart, and they got jobs at the very base with these franchises, and they came up through the sport. They are so protective of what they are. They are not going to trust that guy. He's an interloper to them. And you also have plenty of people around the league who do not want this to work out. They don't want it to work out with Paul DePodesta. They don't want people from other backgrounds having any success. So he's got to fight that. And he's got his power back. He's got the ear of the owner back. That's why it's like, okay, you want Andrew Berry? Just go. Do it. Get it.
But let me do this real fast. Of course, we're visiting with Ken Carman, 92.3 in Cleveland, and of course, national guy, and the best guy we literally could be talking to right now. But and we have people on from all the markets, all the big people who know everything about the team. And I covered the Chiefs day to day for like 4 years, and did a lot of things like that over the years of my career. And when you're into it every single day and you're covering it, you know, obviously you got to cover the story that's happening right then. You don't really zoom out. You don't really get philosophical or abstract. But here's the thing. What the F is DePodesta doing there? What exactly is Haslam thinking? Mm-hmm. I understand he's got a little bit of a football back. This is a baseball guy. He's not in. Okay, is he personnel? Is he hiring guys? Is he there for analytics? That's my whole point, is that it's like with the Cowboys. You got to do your job. You got to cover the Cowboys and Jerry Jones. But what is Jerry doing having a press conference after every game? There's some basic things. So that's my question. I mean, and to me, that's Haslam. So, I mean, is DePodesta, is he going to stay? Is he who? And now we get the report that we're going to, and we know what happened. We got the coach before the general manager. So can you try to sort that out a little bit?
Well, as far as Paul, he's not under contract, so he can go at any time, which scared the hell out of me. I'm going, you're not going to hire a coach and hire a general manager and leave. I'm not doing that. If he does do that, I'm going to rip him every single day, every chance I get. You're part of this. You got to be a part of it. And if he wants to live in San Diego, it scares me because, you know, and he mentioned it.
That's a no-go, man. Haslam needs to. Yesterday
he mentioned his family. Well, when a guy mentions his kids, I can't argue that. But if things go bad, it's the first thing. And people teleconference all the time. I'm in Cleveland, Ohio. You're in LA. But it's different. It's different, and we know it's different. And to football people, they know it's different. To sports, they know it's different. Okay, they all know it's different. They know that you can't run things and be somewhere else. They know that, and so I think a lot of people just tell themselves that because they want to feel better about it. So what he has to do is he has to hire a responsible general manager, which is going to be hard to do because you had a responsible general manager, but then he acted irresponsibly in some ways.
And he's not leaving.
Yeah,
he's going to be there.
Yeah, so he's going to be there. Then you got to hire Then you already hired your head coach. Your head coach has to play a role into that. You have your ownership there, and if you're not there and they go out and they struggle, which they're bound to do at some point, everybody's going to be asking about you. They did this.
This is on Haslam, Ken. Yeah. Ken, this is on Haslam.
It is. And he knows. I think Jimmy right now is. I think Jimmy is, again, I find myself to be the same way. I swear up and down I'd be the same way. Paranoid, nervous. When he got into this situation, it's been well documented. The NFL has set him up with different people to run the organization. When he first started, Joe Banner, Mike Lombardi, those guys. He listens to a lot of people, and sometimes I think he listens to too many people. I know he wants to win. People will kill me for saying that. I know
is he a Jerry Jones micromanager, and is DePodesta
no, because Jerry Jones has confidence in his decisions. I don't know if Jimmy has confidence in his decisions.
I'm glad that's what I need to find out. To get his personality profile, because what explains, and I think it makes sense because DePodesta is the authority guy, but that's the bridge, isn't that Jimmy's? If you were working there and you were the GM and the coach, wouldn't you look at DePodesta kind of as Jimmy's spy too?
Yeah, yes, but you can't spy if you're not in town.
Right.
So
yeah, right.
It's a very odd thing. I think Jimmy looks at Paul as this is a smart guy who he hasn't really given a full chance yet. The other guys, like he bought into John Dorsey and he bought into Sashi. And now, because you have the two things that happened. One, when they hired Hugh Jackson, the story came out, Paul really liked Sean McDermott. And I kind of poo-pooed it anyway because I go, Sean McDermott's a hell of a coach and a hell of a guy. Sean McDermott probably would have gotten canned here anyway because they weren't trying to win.
Yeah.
The other part of it is that last year, Freddie Kitchens, during that season, there's a report leaked that he actually liked, talking about Paul, he actually liked Kevin Stefanski. And I'm thinking, okay, so basically you have the same responsibility as a radio talk show host. He has the same responsibility as me. I can flip-flop anywhere I want and say I really like that guy or I really like that guy. I have no bearing on the real true success of the Browns. And so now it's like, all right, you have responsibility to this. So now I can hold you to something. My biggest fear, and I'm glad we got to this, is that if they go 7-9 next year, all right, well, now Paul's gone, and that means Stefanski's going to be gone, and that means the next general manager is going to be gone. Because I don't want to ping pong to these things. So it's like, okay, you're going to do this with DePodesta and general manager A, B, or C, and then Kevin Stefanski. And Kevin Stefanski, again, likable guy, seems nice. If you do it, you got to go the whole way. You got to figure it out. I just want to see how some of the talent works with these guys. So it's a scary scenario.
I'm just telling you right now, ultimately, I'm not saying it's doomed, but I am kind of saying it's doomed because not doomed, but they put themselves back
that way. A lot of people.
I see them doing they're doing Jimmy's doing the same thing in that what self-respecting quality general manager, former GM, or a guy who's poised to become a general manager, that's kind of an unprecedented, weird situation. You've got DePodesta there. He's off site. Instead of DePodesta throwing in with Dorsey and Freddie, and let's get inside the organization, try to fix things. You're telling me these stories. It sounds like maybe somebody's out there leaking that they would have rather had. And now we've got everybody talking about it. I wonder who leaked those things. But so to me, it would have been on DePodesta to find a way to make it work. It sounds like instead he's kind of taking pot shots from. So the bottom line is, what quality candidate are you going to get to be the? And if you can't get that, the chance that you're going to be a success is right back down to 10, 20%. That's kind of a shot in the dark. That's kind of the way I see it playing out. What do you think?
Two names get brought up: George Payton, who has some success in scouting. They wanted to talk to Ed Dobbs. Ed Dobbs predictably turned them down. Ed Dobbs works for the Colts. There's a connection there between Chris Ballard and John Dorsey.
Okay. But so he might have taken it then. He may have taken it then.
Well, we heard a couple of things that he might be a low-key kind of guy, but honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he was warned about the situation and decided no. But because, again, Chris Ballard and John Dorsey are close, and John Dorsey's just been separated with his relationship with the Browns. And then I mentioned George Payton. Then there's Andrew Berry. And Andrew Berry is a really smart guy, but is Andrew Berry ready to assemble a scouting staff and to assemble what needs to be done as soon as you possibly can? Because they're in a weird situation than they've been before. Before, you just hired guys and you threw your lot in with them and you thought you were going to just reinvent the Browns every single time you did it. Now they actually have a team that was supposed to be competitive. So how do you add on to a team that's supposed to already be competitive? It's not like, okay, we're going to go 4-12 this year, but then it's not like that anymore. The reason everybody got fired is because you didn't make the playoffs. Right, so right. How are they able to handle it? So when I talk to different people, and again, I brought up that thing before about there are people who don't want this to work. If I talk to different people from a couple of different places, they look at it and go, this is doomed. This is going to be doomed, and you guys are going to do this again. And then there's plenty of people, when I talk to them on the other side, they will go, just give it a shot, for crying out loud. Just go the whole way through and see what it does, because at least if you give it a shot for any clear given amount of time, it could go belly up just like anything else. But if it goes belly up, at least you gave a guy a shot again. And that means if you wanted to go on a traditional football route, then you could bring somebody else in. Because the guy who's widely respected around the league, you just brought him in and then you just let him go in John Dorsey.
Right. And I mean, there's no discernible chain of command. And I want to ask you real quick about Haslam. I had read a report, I think, that he wanted, when he was meeting with McDaniels, maybe it came out in the Cleveland papers, that apparently during this interview that McDaniels just had, Haslam would want to meet with him every week or have an audience with him. Was that the case?
I would assume yes. Now, there's a difference because the one meeting is on a Monday and the other meeting is supposed to be on a Friday. Kevin Stefanski yesterday and this morning refuted a Friday meeting. He said there's no. He goes, yes, we work with analytics people throughout the week. Albert Breer, Dustin Fox, my coworker, they did not back down from that. They still said, no. Our sources say he requested a Friday. So you believe what you want to. Kevin Stefanski had two chances to shoot it down. He shot it down both times. The Monday thing, The Monday thing is always a little scary because it's the owner, and who knows how much an owner will get involved. It's a weird thing because I could always say, well, I want to keep the owner out of it. Well, you know what? The owner owns a team, and they're entitled to go see whatever they want to. And I can see your reaction from that. It's a scary scenario.
Listen, I have no problem with Jimmy Haslam being involved, and I think that when you look at the Mara family, they're the exact opposite. They are too removed, and they have allowed Gettleman to take over. Mm-hmm. And to a certain extent, you can understand it. It's a chain of command. That's how business works. That's fine. I would rather have an organization like that where you have a discernible chain of command. I think Haslam's moving around, and we're not really sure how much he is actually involved. And the DePodesta thing is a huge red flag. But it's funny, as we've talked, and we're visiting with Ken Carmen, 92.3 in Cleveland, we've talked about a million different things except the coach, Stefanski. Could you give me your read on him? And when you talk about personnel and you have this vacuum right now, general manager, do you think he might have tried to assert himself or be thinking about that and cultivate that in the future?
Boy, if they win, I could see him.
Yeah.
If they start to win, I think any coach is going to do that. Right?
Bill O'Brien.
Yeah. They'll become more confident. And tell you what, if they win and those players are responding to him, don't be surprised whatsoever if Paul starts to fade further and further away. And then one day we find out, hey, Paul DePodesta's, there you go. Here you go. The general manager and Paul will Paul will go about his way and enjoy his life and great things that he's got going on in California. Because Jimmy wants to trust something that is going to be successful. So if Kevin's successful and the players are responding to Kevin, I guarantee he'll support the head coach, which is basically what any fan wants to happen. But you got to find people you respect in the first place. I think Kevin is earnest. I don't know him at all right now. I only know of him. I've only spoken to him once, and
Did you think it was a good hire?
I don't know. I'm not going to say it wasn't because I don't know these things. I think that Josh McDaniels, who was the guy I wanted, who knows? Who knows if he learned his lesson? You brought up Joe Judge. I think Joe Judge was a bit of a freak out move, but Joe Judge speaks strongly. Maybe Joe Judge will end up being a great coach. I'm not the hottest take guy on coaching hires.
Right.
I'm really not, and I don't want to subject Kevin Stefanski to what went on this last year. I don't want to make – it's hard not to. I don't want to make comparisons between he and Freddie Kitchens. I don't want to do that. So it wasn't my first choice. It wasn't my last choice. The one guy I would not have liked was Brian Daboll. Right. But you talk to former Brown Joe Thomas. Joe Thomas loves Brian Daboll. And I did not want anything to do with Brian Daboll. So it's an eye of the beholder type of thing. That's basically what it is. But he comes off as a likable person. He was very nervous in the press conference, which just show humility. At least when he started the press conference in his opening statement. Once he started answering questions, he relaxed and was better. But man, in that opening statement, I go, boy, because we do try to pay attention to public speaking, obviously, and what you and I do, and Lyman and I were kind of going, my co-host and I were kind of going like, oh boy, he's nervous. You can tell he's doing that breathing thing that people do when they're nervous, speaking in front of a crowd. So that makes me feel better. Because
who do you have?
Go ahead. Well, I thought I was like, okay, his ego's not so big that he knows he's new. Hopefully he command. Now, I think football players are different, but hell, he's dealt with Stephon Diggs, and Adam Thielen was bitching up the room, and he deals with Kirk Cousins. So if he's able to deal with them okay, then maybe he's just not good around the media and everything like that. But if he has a couple of good seasons, I'm sure he'll get much better around the media.
Right. And I guess the elephant in the room is when you're talking about Stefanski, that's kind of the good news, but it's kind of the bad news. And so you're saying to yourself, okay, the adult in the room is right now in La Jolla. He's in San Diego. So the adult in the room, right? Who is the adult in the room there permanently? And is there someone who's running personnel? I mean, is there someone internally that's going to mind the store right now?
Oh, that would be the new general manager and whoever he hires to be assistants to him. Honestly, that's going to come down to Kevin. I mean, there's some futures that are in question here. I think OBJ's future is in question, whether or not he's with the Cleveland Browns in the future. Jake Trotter from ESPN was saying that earlier this morning. I couldn't help but agree. And I wanted OBJ badly. and I've made a bunch of excuses for OBJ, or at least tried to see it his way on a lot of things. But you got a new guy coming in, and it could just be a situation of the offense ran fine last year, 2 years ago, I should say now, because this last season's already ended. They seemed to force the ball to OBJ. He wasn't their number one wide receiver. Jarvis Landry was their number one wide receiver. Odell is an insanely talented player, and I really am a fan of his. But I can't name a situation he's made better in the last 5 years.
Yeah, right.
And so I think that that's something that they're going to consider, because I was John Dorsey's guy, and John Dorsey's no longer there, so they're going to make some decisions there. Because, I mean, hell, Jake Trotter said it, and I couldn't fight it. Well, would you trade him for an elite left tackle right now to protect Baker Mayfield?
Of course. I would. I mean, he's a luxury item.
So
for the Browns can't afford to have a luxury item, can they?
I thought they did.
Or maybe does Baker have to have him because maybe Baker's not as good as we thought he was?
Yes. No, I don't think. I don't think he needs him, because last year, Darren Fells, who they cut for whatever reason, and then he's able to contribute to the tune of like 10 touchdowns with Houston this year. He found Darren Fells. He was able to find Rashard Higgins. Rashard Higgins had a nice season last year. Jarvis obviously had a nice season. He wasn't a 1,000-yard wide receiver, but he obviously had a nice season. Nick Chubb was found well. Things worked out okay. They had a better offensive line. Well, a guy like Baker, who's 6 feet tall, needs a better offensive line. Who's a young quarterback, needs a good offensive line. Like, they need those things. And defensively, boy, when Myles Garrett was lost for the last 6 games, this could be seen as an excuse for Steve Wilks, the defensive coordinator. When you lose Myles Garrett for the last 6 weeks, you had no pass rush. So then he can't send a blitz because it's a waste of time anyway, from what it seems. And you're putting a secondary that had some guys who were hurt. You're putting them in a bad situation. So the defense probably wasn't as good as we thought it was going to be. And then offensively, if you still had Kevin Zeitler, you'd still be okay. The guard that they traded to the Giants, if you still had Kevin Zeitler, you'd still be okay. But I don't think that Kevin Zeitler would have made the biggest difference. Greg Robinson was bad. Chris Hubbard, he might have made Chris Hubbard's job a little easier. So maybe I should take some of that back. Excuse me for coughing. He might have made Chris Hubbard's job a little bit easier, but Chris Hubbard was rough. The replacement that they had for Kevin Zeitler, there was just a blind spot for offensive linemen last year. 2/5 of the offensive line was fine, and you can't have 2/5 of your offensive line playing okay. You're going to get killed. And I think that Baker could hear some footsteps, and I think he lacked confidence down the stretch. There were games that when they played, and it kind of, I hope this makes sense to you, Brooks. I don't mean to keep you too long, but
oh no,
when they played the Dolphins and they were expected to beat the Dolphins because the Dolphins weren't a good football team, he played well because I think it reminded him of college. I think he reverted back to college, where hey, you're playing Georgia. When you're playing Georgia and Mel Tucker's defense at the time, they're going to come after you, and they got after him. That's a good defense. And not that he didn't play well against some good opponents in the past. He obviously has. But when he was expected to beat teams, they acted like a college team, and they were able to beat some teams. There were a couple of teams that got him in the end because I thought they quit, notably Arizona. But when they were playing Miami and when they played Cincinnati the first time and the Jets and things like that, they acted like a college team would. They acted like they were at Oklahoma or at A&M or anything like that. They just beat those teams on talent.
It's great hearing all of this analysis because it just makes me think, okay, you put Freddie Kitchens into the situation, a guy who had a personal attachment to Baker, but now he doesn't anymore.
Yeah.
And he has no experience. And he's going to go off and be head coach. John Dorsey, that's your call. You're throwing, and you're not going to give him the level of I mean, to me, what you're describing here is a team that had to be driven by assistant coaches, quarterback coach, coordinators. This isn't, obviously you got Kitchens there, and that's what you normally do. But apparently the Browns didn't. I mean, is that what happened, or did they not have? And maybe because maybe because Dorsey or whomever didn't want authority from the coaching staff. I don't know, but it was a recipe for disaster.
There was a lot of buddies in it. You look at the quarterback room, Garrett Gilbert. I got nothing against Garrett Gilbert. Garrett Gilbert played high school football with Baker. They brought in another guy, Tettleton. I forget his name. I'm just having a brain fart now. Who was another Lake Travis guy from Texas. It was almost set up too comfortable for Baker Mayfield. You had Ryan Lindley, who is Freddie's old buddy from Arizona.
Yeah.
Instead, and
no authority. No
yeah,
authority.
there's no authority.
Right.
So they made a classic mistake of Baker has great talent, but when I look around the league, you see true franchise quarterbacks. There's still a system of checks and balances. Russell Wilson's an MVP.
Tom Brady, dude.
Tom Brady still has Belichick. You still have Pete Carroll. Roethlisberger, say what you want about Tomlin. Maybe that's an argument, but the only person I could see who had any bit of the latitude that Baker Mayfield had is Aaron Rodgers. And it took him 14 years to get that latitude. Deshaun Watson, Bill O'Brien runs the show. Patrick Mahomes, better than everybody. Andy Reid runs the show. For better, for worse, Adam Gase runs the show. And it's just they gave everything to Baker. Baker could be a savant, but my God, you can't put him in that spot. And I signed off on it because I'm a dummy on the radio. I'm not a general manager. You're responsible in the end.
Man, well, I've already kept it too long. This has been an unbelievable conversation because now I feel like at least I'm in the neighborhood of having a grasp, because I think it's really important to understand what happened last year. But I think, dude, what's really, really interesting is it's like you're staring into an abyss trying to figure out what Haslam is doing here with this kind of unprecedented. But that's what makes the NFL so great. We have these huge businesses of huge scale, and they're owned by families. And that's what makes it so fun, because everybody's different. And so we can have these kinds of conversations. So I can't thank you enough. This has been awesome. I really appreciate it.
Real quick, I tell people all the time, you mentioned the family thing. And it gets me killed for it, but I go, I know he wants to win. I do know he wants to win. I know the family wants to win, but people go, sell the team. Get comfortable. They ain't getting rid of that team for a long time. So the only thing it's true. The only thing you can do is just hope that they find it by accident and they hold on to it for a long time, the way that some people accuse Bob Kraft of doing, or they finally learn it the way, because we always try to make ourselves feel better here, and we go, well, it took Art Rooney 40 years to get it right before he found Chuck Noll. So
and the Bidwells have never gotten it right. Ever. The Lions are an original franchise, have never been to the Super Bowl. So that's the bad news. But you have there's a lot of those families and a lot of those situations around. I mean, I think I would put Jones in that category right now. Yeah. But that's I think why a Belichick, I'm not taking anything away from him, but I think that's his bigger reason why he's a huge success is the nature of these organizations. I mean, Jimmy Haslam right now does not have a chain of command. No. And any self-respecting general manager candidate or GM, I just can't see them. They might, it's possible, but this is after all of these problems before, a little bit different problems, but now we're kind of rolling the dice again. So I don't know. I feel your pain as a Chiefs fan, just sitting there, and I'm not going to reverse jinx by saying a word about our chances. But it's been a long time coming where I really feel like we have a shot.
You better be careful about Mike Vrabel. That guy's scary. That team is scary.
Dude, I'm telling you right now, I think the Titans are going to win that game. And you mentioned Adam Gase. This is something that people aren't mentioning. Ryan Tannehill looked like a different human being in Miami. I'm watching him. I had completely given up on him. Watching him, he could not play.
We saw them week one real quick, and they just let because we were sitting there going, how did they get hammered by 30 points here? And you're watching the game. Greg Robinson gets kicked out of the starting left tackle, gets kicked out of the game for kicking a guy. You had 18 penalties, and actually you had 20, but two were declined. So you committed 20 penalties. It's good coaching. It's discipline. I mean, Baker Mayfield was rated as elite through 3 quarters, and then through 3 picks in the final quarter. I don't think they're the most talented team in the world. They just they know discipline. They have some talent. They have some talent, but they're disciplined. They let teams beat themselves, and it can't be stressed enough that when you have a guy like Derrick Henry and all these teams are running 7 defensive back sets, you're 22. Hey. You don't have Ronnie Lott. You ain't stopping that guy. So
the best performance I've seen the whole playoffs was the offensive line of the Titans in this last game. And I think it really is a cliche, but Henry's success, their success on offense, or really, I mean, Tannehill hasn't played a big role. It has fed off each other. That offensive line kind of came out of nowhere and was just kicking ass. So I have absolutely, I hate to say it, absolutely no confidence that the Chiefs are going to win this game.
No, come on.
I don't.
That's
I don't.
a hell of an offense. That's a hell of an offense.
But believe you're right. I mean, it is, but I don't know. I just the defense is a major issue. And you know, the solace for me is Tannehill hasn't been an overwhelmingly great guy in the playoffs, but they haven't needed him to be. So I can't thank you enough, man. I really appreciate it, Ken.
Thank you, my friend.
The best.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
That's Ken Carman of 92.3 The Fan and nationally on CBS Radio. And you got to catch him out on Saturdays. There's nothing better than flipping around in the car on Saturdays and hearing Ken Carman nationally on CBS Radio doing a show. Does that guy love football? That's what it's all about. Speaking of a guy who is around football, has been for a long time, knows it, loves it, John McClain joins us from Houston now. So we just got done talking about the Browns, and now we're going to we're gluttons for punishment. We're going to talk about the Texans, another fascinating study of an NFL team. John, I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much for your time.
Hey, Brooks, it's my pleasure. I'm sorry I didn't have time to shave, but I've been doing talk shows since 6 a.m.
Wow. Well, one thing I'm not going to forget that I'm not going to keep you too long, but we're going to talk about the Texans.
All the time you need.
But okay. Well, let me start first with something I know you know a lot about it. Matt Rule and Matt Rule's departure to the Panthers and the nature of that situation. And just real 2 seconds. My impression was that Matt Rule was really considering the Giants, but perhaps that press conference where Dave Kettleman says computer folks, right? And then when Rule is hired, we hear all about his analytics department and how it is a huge priority for him, right? And so when I juxtapose those two things, it leads me to believe that perhaps Rule had a little trepidation about a Gettleman. Do you think that was a factor? And just what's your overview of that situation, Matt Rule leaving? Because I know you also have the Baylor perspective on it.
Well, I'm a Baylor grad, and Matt did an incredible job there. He interviewed with the Colts after his first year. The Jets last year, could have had the Jets job. We all knew that he was going to the NFL because when you interview after you win one game and then 7 games, when you win 11, you better go. And Dave Tepper went to Waco and he took Marty Herney, and I don't think it had anything to do with Gettleman. I think it had to do with the fact that Tepper's a salesman. Matt Rule's a salesman. I guarantee you they hit it off. I've been around Rule. He gets it. He gets it, Brooks. He's got that it factor. He seems a lot younger than he is. He gets along with everybody, really respects and understands the media. He's not one of these paranoid control freaks who treats us like gum on the bottom of their shoe. I told my buddies in Carolina, you're going to like dealing with this guy. And I think he and Tepper's paying a lot of money for him, coaches. I thought Joe Brady was a great move. But I'm sure Matt will do well. Of course, they got to decide, do they want to stick with the quarterbacks they have, Kyle Allen or maybe a healthy Cam Newton, or do they want to try to get one in the first round? They probably have to trade up, maybe Justin Herbert. But I have a lot of confidence that Matt is going to do really well for the Panthers because I've seen him do it 2 times now.
I can't imagine. I mean, it must feel like I don't know what people are feeling right now in Waco after this euphoric situation, and then all of a sudden, unfortunately, you kind of saw it coming. But assess what's going on with Baylor. What could we expect? Do you think down the line with them?
They went from 1 win to 7 wins to 11 wins. The losses were 3 points in overtime to Oklahoma, and then Georgia beat them up in the Sugar Bowl. Program's in good shape. They're about to build. They got a great facilities, including a great football office, but now they want a better one. So they're about to build that. Money's not an issue. Had Art Briles stayed there the last year, he would have made $7 million a year. And so I think that a lot of people want that job. Some of the top college writers, Pete Thamel said Justin Fuente is the leading candidate. I would love to have him as the head coach at Baylor. I have the utmost confidence in Mac Rose, the AD, because when he hired Rule, I'm like, why would he bring a guy from Philadelphia to Waco, Texas? And one of Matt's good buddies, Sean Ryan, was the quarterback coach of the Texans then. He told me 15 minutes after he touches down in Waco, he's going to make everybody feel like he's from native Texan.
What is your thoughts about Mike McCarthy and getting hired by the Cowboys?
I think it's a terrific hire, and here's why. Usually you're remembered by what happened at the end, and it all fell apart at the end. And I think McCarthy was smart. Take a year off. Then people start to look at your overall record. Don Payton was 7-9 3 years in a row. Everybody wanted him gone. The Benson stuck with him, and then Don's viewed as a great coach. But if you put his record next to Mike McCarthy's record, they're almost identical. I think McCarthy will really help Dak Prescott and that offense. And I'm glad he was able to come back, just like Jason Garrett needs to take a year off. People forget what happened the last year. Maybe Jason will have a chance to be a head coach again. I think he'll probably have to be an offensive coordinator first.
Do you think Jerry and Steven are going to assert control over the coaching staff? We've heard that Kellen Moore may be kind of taking a big role as offensive coordinator, or maybe taking over that role. And you got Jason Witten out there, but you got Jerry's guys. I mean, what do you think is going to be the level of authority that McCarthy has in hiring, and then also, in-game decisions on the offensive side of the ball?
Well, I think he's going to call the plays. I think he's going to be in charge. They're letting him bring in Mike Nolan's defensive coordinator. They're letting him get rid of some good coaches like Rod Marinelli, Chris Richard. So I think they're letting him hire the coaches. Jerry's a salesman. Brooks, you know that. When he sits down with you, he can sell you anything. So people are like, who would want to work for Jerry Jones? It's America's team. It's the Cowboys. Almost every coach would like to work there. And when he's talking to Jerry will go, don't believe those things you read and hear. I don't do it like that. And you're like, wow, I want to work for this man. I think it's a good marriage. And I think being out for a year and getting fired is probably good for Mike McCarthy.
And we're visiting with John McClain, Houston Chronicle. All over, there are too many places in multimedia, radio and television to mention to fit in and still do the interview. So, man, when I was on Twitter over the weekend, and of course, I'm from Kansas City. I'm a Chiefs fan, so I'm
Congratulations.
Well, we'll see. I think there's a very good chance the Titans win that game. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong.
Hey, Brooks, you sound like a typical Chiefs fan who knows what it's been like at Arrowhead Stadium for Andy Reid, including when the Titans came up there and beat them 3 years ago with Mike McCarthy. And I love Mahomes. I know you do too. I have some good buddies who are from Kansas City, and everybody's like, yeah, they should win, but. And the thing about the Titans, if you win at New England and you win at Baltimore, you can win at Kansas City. And one of the things the Chiefs have to do the worst to stop the run. And if they had to commit too many to Derrick Henry, Tannehill can throw it down the field. I mean, how many guys throw 2 touchdown passes and have a touchdown rushing fewer than 100 yards? I'm partial to the Titans because I like Mike Vrabel, but I would love to see Andy Reid go to a Super Bowl and Mahomes if they do beat the Titans. I think it's a great game. But as you can imagine, Brooks, people in Houston are devastated. They would actually be favored to go to the Super Bowl if the Chiefs had not bounced back from that 24-0 deficit. Now, let me ask you something, Brooks. 24-0 in the second quarter. What are you thinking?
You know what it is? The thing about Bill O'Brien, there's a few of these coaches, a few of these teams out there that when I saw we had, not the Texans, Bill O'Brien, I knew that you absolutely did not know what to expect, right? I had no idea. And he is one of the very few coaches where when things are happening, you still kind of hold out hope on both sides because you just never know. And watching him in the press conference afterwards, where he was kind of at a loss for situations, it's almost like, events are just overtaking him and the Texans to a certain extent. So it sounds absolutely nuts. And there was a little numbness there too. But at least having Bill O'Brien in the back of my mind gave me a little bit of and that's not to denigrate the Texans. It is what it is. But when you're on social media over the weekend, I would say the biggest thing people were talking about on Monday and throughout the weekend, Bill O'Brien, how does he still have a job? And I was thinking about when you came on the show and told us he's safe. Don't worry about it. He could end up general manager too. So where are you on Bill O'Brien right now?
I wrote a column yesterday. He is the head coach. He is the general manager without the title. He has all the power. It's not changing. They're not going to fire him after he won the division fourth time in 5 years, and won his second playoff game. But man, had they gone to Arrowhead and lost, say, 31-24 as 9.5-point underdogs, people wouldn't feel so bad. But when they led 24-0, they saw what Vrabel and the Titans had done at Baltimore. O'Brien's never won a playoff game on the road. And then they thought, man, Houston could host the AFC Championship for the first time in history, have a team in the AFC Championship for the first time since the 79 Oilers, and they get out for a 24-0 lead. People got their hopes up. And then when O'Brien had that boneheaded call on a fake punt, that's when I thought they're going to lose the game. When it was 24-0, I told my guys from the Chronicle, I said, guys, I've seen bigger leads than this broken, meaning Buffalo and the Oilers. Right. And when Hardman had that 58-yard kickoff return, I'm like, it's 24-7. Yeah, okay. But then when he went for the fake punt, I said, this one's over. And so that's why people in Houston are so devastated, just like the Chiefs fans are going to be devastated if Andy loses another one at home.
There were several times during the game, but he made a couple of catastrophic mistakes that normally you'll see a coach do that maybe once a year, twice a year. He made it in one half, and to me, not only were they catastrophic mistakes on the field that an NFL coach shouldn't make, but more importantly, it sent a message to his team, how he felt about where they were. And I just remember towards the end of the game when he wanted to punt the football and Deshaun Watson had to make sure they went for it. That's unbelievable. I mean,
he's getting roasted for that. And that's one of the things that he did that people are killing him about. And we asked him all about it the day after, and he talked about it, didn't have specific answers. But that's one thing that continues to frustrate people here, is they're not going to get farther. And if they do, he'll make some mistakes on the game that'll keep them from going the next step. So I've never seen a coach who has done to get to the playoffs as much as O'Brien has, that everybody wants the guy gone, but it's not happening.
So why is it not happening?
Because the owner, Cal McNair, who doesn't do interviews, Cal McNair looks at the record, the playoffs. Okay, we won a game this year. We'll make more moves in the offseason, get a little better, have our goal as Super Bowl, and maybe get another step. But also, I'm guessing, too, they don't have anybody right out there that we think, okay, we're going to get this guy. But I think Bill O'Brien would have to have 2 losing records in a row to get fired. He's got 3 more years left on his contract, beginning with this year, and he is in charge. He is the general manager without the title, and I laid it all out yesterday in the Chronicle and on our website. It's not changing anytime soon, so no matter how much fans and media howl about it and demand that he be fired, ain't happening, Brooks.
So why did why did the Texans lose that game the way they lost? Because I really haven't asked you the basic question. Why did they lose that game? What if there was 1 or 2 reasons, and assess Bill O'Brien
right there, Brooks.
What's that?
That's the reason right there. Choke.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but I mean that's an abstract thing, to a certain extent. Is there anything you could think about, or is there anything specific when it comes to Bill O'Brien? Maybe he doesn't have a connection to his team, so there's no command over the team to keep the team together.
Here's why they lost that game. They're up 24-0. They give up a 58-yard kickoff return, boom, touchdown. Then they have a fake punt, boom, touchdown. That's 2. I've never seen special teams impact both sides of the ball so much in that game. Score a touchdown on a block punt, recover a muff punt, touchdown, and then 3 in a row. The 58-yard kickoff return, the botched fake punt, and then the fumble kickoff return. And so we're killing the defense in Houston, 7 consecutive touchdowns, right. 41 consecutive extra points. But those first 3 all started in the Texans' end of the field. And truthfully, O'Brien's got nothing to do with those special teams mistakes. We want to blame him for everything, and he should be blamed for some of those decisions we're talking about. But when you start to have big things happen against you that didn't happen in regular season, it snowballs. It's contagious. I saw it the biggest choke in history 27 years ago in Buffalo. I covered it. We've been
You're
running.
the kiss of death.
We've been running that headline a lot in the front page on social media in the Chronicle, HoustonChronicle.com. And there's my story right there at the top then and as it is now. And I think that everybody choked at the same time, including Bill O'Brien as players.
And you mentioned, and it's impossible to miss, and this is the question I should have asked. Who is there someone, a player, coach, whatever it is, when you look at the epic collapse of the Texans defense, obviously you got a great offense, right? But that was an epic collapse of the Texans defense that I hadn't even mentioned yet. I mean, is there something you can point to as to why that
pass rush against an offensive line that played way better than it usually does? The running game didn't work against a bad run defense, but the secondary was awful. And they don't have anybody who can cover Travis Kelce. The only one they ever had was A.J. Boye, the corner. They put him on Kelce one year, did a great job. Then they let him go to Jacksonville in free agency. They tried 3 different players, and they tried zone and double teaming Kelce, and he still had 10 catches for over 100 yards and 3 touchdowns. Their failure to contain Travis Kelce was what killed the defense more than anything.
Visiting with John McClain, venerable columnist of the Houston Chronicle. And I know you're covering football, but I also know you're a sports fan, and you can't miss the Astros, what's going on right now. I mean, what are your thoughts about just about the Astros situation as you look at it from someone who's on the ground there and has followed it forever?
Think about this, Brooks. How many cities have you ever had a double whammy like the Texans and the Astros have? Texans blow that 24-point lead. People are so angry and infuriated. Wow. And so I go into Bill O'Brien's news conference Monday, and while I'm in there talking to him, I see Rob Manfred's decisions come down. Okay, they get suspended. They lose first and second round picks 2 years, $5 million fine. We expected things like that. We thought Hinch might be suspended for 6 months and Luno a year. But then I go out in my car, and I get in my car, and I hear Jim Crane talk about firing Hinch and Luno, and like, oh my God, I can't believe he did that, because Hinch is
I can't either.
Popular with the players, the fans, the media. He'll be working as a manager in a year, and he'll probably be on TV during the year he's out. And Luno's more of a behind-the-scenes guy. I hear these national people saying, national media saying, well, they might be back in the game. No, owners want to win. And so it was devastating to the franchise. They still got a hell of a team. And a lot of guys want that job. And you talk back, Brooks, this year, if there's a team playing with a chip on its shoulder, because everywhere it goes is going to hear cheaters, cheaters. You talk about circling the wagons and playing with a chip on their shoulder to be the Astros. We've had a lot of devastating things happen in our city when sports, but there's never been a 1-2 punch like that, and a lot of people are knocked out.
Yeah, and I'm glad we have you on, because we can really zoom out, from a historical perspective. The way I look at the situation with the Astros is, I'm not defending the Astros by any stretch, but this kind of thing, I'm talking about off-field utilizing technology, be it the 1951 New York Giants against the Dodgers, the Jackie Robinson, Bobby Thompson, that kind of Giants win the pennant. The Giants are documented to have been doing things off the field, and that's it. This has been going on since baseball started, so this is nothing new. The only difference is some people on Twitter, on social media that we have, individuals posted smoking gun evidence to the point where it was overwhelming, where Major League Baseball had to do something. They made a gesture that was a rather hollow gesture when you consider there was no punishment for the players. I understand the union and all that, which is why if I was consulting Jim Crane, I would say, Jim, everybody has done this since the beginning of time. Here's the unique circumstance. Don't fire those guys, because this is my opinion. I want to ask you, because no one's going to remember this in the future. This is going to be something that has been going on for a long time. Major League Baseball has gotten away with ignoring it, and it'll continue to go. And this is all going to blow over. Don't do that. So what do you think is going to play out in the future? How do you think this will impact what's going on in baseball?
They're investigating the Red Sox now. Red Sox fired Alex Cora before the penalty could come down because of his role as the bench coach here in 17, and then winning a World Series with the Red Sox. And the investigation extends into other teams as well. Teams are going to try to cheat because, as you said, it's probably the world's second oldest profession. And I think that with the Astros, and I heard Trevor Bauer on MLB radio yesterday, and Trevor's been very outspoken about the Astros, but he said, how could you suspend players? You don't know who's standing at home plate listening to a trash can be banging. Some people I don't want to listen to that. I'm focused on the pitcher. How would you know who to suspend and how long? And he's been one of their biggest critics. And if he feels that way, I understand it, to start picking and choosing. But I think Hinch will be back in a year.
Right.
Luno has some guys that worked here under him who are general managers with other teams. I could see them hiring him, putting him in the front office, and see if he could work his way back into a GM role. There's no doubt in my mind Hinch is going to be employed in 2021 because he's too good and popular. And as far as the Astros, they got more guys they have to sign. But their key is not their hitting. Does Justin Verlander show his age? Does Zach Greinke show his age? Can Lance McCullers come back from Tommy John surgery? Can Jose Urquidy pick up where he left off in the playoffs? And then the best pitcher in minor league baseball at this time last year, according to all the ratings, was Forrest Whitley. But he was a huge disappointment. Can he live up to the potential? That's potentially 5 starters right there. But I can't wait. I'm to see who they get. Bruce Bochy's thrown out there, Brad Osmus. I think both positions are going to be promoted from within.
And it sounds like the rich get richer to me. We'll see what happens. We'll see what plays out. I'm fascinated now to really follow the Astros, what happens at the front office, what happens on the field. But in 2 years, will we even remember, because they're not going to vacate the World Series, there's nothing that's really substantive that has happened. In 2 years, will we remember or be even thinking about this cheating thing? Is this going to totally blow over, you think?
I don't think it'll blow over anytime soon because of social media. There's outrage.
Right.
Usually scandal, people are like, oh, another scandal in sports. Or they're very forgiving when people apologize. But because the Astros were not a popular team, and it didn't have anything to do with the players. Players are great guys. It had to do with Luno. A lot of people didn't like him, the analytics, getting rid of all of his scouts. And so they just weren't a popular team. And so I think people love this, that it happens. All the Yankee fans, all the Dodger fans think they got screwed in the playoffs in the World Series in 2017. And I think that, and maybe they did, but the fact is, Brooks, last season, Manfred said there was no indication of any cheating. They went to the 7th game of the World Series. They lost 3 World Series games at home, and they still played pretty well. So for everybody that says they won the World Series because they cheated, they have to say, okay, they didn't get to the 7th game without cheating, so it's got to still be a pretty good team. I think down the road, they'll always be known as a tainted World Series, and what they need to do is win another one.
Well, last thing for you. We already kept you too long. I appreciate it. The last thing, is Fuente going to be the guy at Baylor? Because I know you know what the heck's going on up there. I know you know. Or is it going to be a guy like McGuire? Napier's name's been thrown out, and I'm sure there'll be other names thrown out. But do you think Fuente is going to be the guy?
I do, because the top college guys have said he's a leading candidate. They pay a lot of money. They got great facilities, coming off 11-3, a lot of players back. Joey McGuire's on the staff, very popular. He's never been a head coach except in high school. I think right now, when the job is so coveted by so many coaches, I think you got to get a guy who has been experienced, like Matt Rule, like Art Briles was. Go out and get a guy who's proven it at least twice. And I'd love to see Justin Fuente get that. He's an offensive coach. And I hope they do get him. And I hope he's not just using it to get a big raise from Virginia Tech.
And, God, if he does that, that would be ridiculous. But I'm rooting for Baylor because, as a guy who loves college football history, Baylor being a really good team, that's great for college football, especially now when we're kind of drilling down on 3. I'm really rooting for Baylor. And the thing about Baylor that strikes me that I've learned from you is there's a hell of a lot of resources. That's not the issue.
No.
So I'm rooting for the Baylor Bears. I can't thank you enough. Great intel as always. Thank you,
Hey,
John.
Brooks, I got to leave you with this. Baylor men, number 2 in the country. Baylor women, number 1. And I'll say this, sick 'em Bears.
A little Coach O action there. Thanks a lot, John. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, Brooks. Thank you.
That is John McClain, Houston Chronicle. And I told you about Baylor, that this guy's plugged in. And you could take whatever he's going to tell you about the Texans or about the Bears, Stros, whatever, to the bank. And really stands out of the people that we've had on this show, upwards of 200 people. So, but it's been a lot of fun. The last couple of weeks, we've been stretching things out, spending more time with people that know their stuff, but also, we're bringing people to you every day that are in the middle of this kind of incendiary situation, cauldron, where I could tell you, knowing Ken Carman is like kind of a legendary figure, the guy that we had on earlier from 92.3 The Fan in Cleveland, notorious for his rants about the Browns. And so, when we, and I know Ken, and he's a pro, he's on CBS radio on Saturdays nationally. So you don't have to worry about it to that end. He's not, wild and crazy and going to go off the rails, but knowing how into it he is, knowing how knowledgeable he is, and the fact that he is actually associated with the Browns to a certain extent on their broadcast, but that he's candid. Like the last week or two, I've been thinking about him every day, saying, we got to get him on the show, because you just never know what you're going to get. And before we had him on, and keep me posted, Cam, on Robert. Before we had him on, no matter what, who I talked to, whether it was on the show, off the air, what I read, I really couldn't grasp what happened to Dorsey, make sense of it. Because, he just got there. I know Deep at S is there. And so it kind of makes sense because you have this weird setup with no chain of command where you don't know what it is if you work there and you're a coach or a GM. And so now that makes sense. And thanks to him. Speaking of making sense of something, the best in the business is TMZ Sports for my money, sports journalism wise. And man, the rich get richer when they bring in Robert Littall. Not a coincidence that Robert Littall, Black Sports Online, is now at TMZ Sports as well. Now he's a television star, and I mean that literally, every night on FS1. So Robert Littall of Black Sports Line now, blacksportsonline.com, BSO on Twitter, and TMZ Sports joining us. And Robert, man, I can't thank you enough for just coming on here at a moment's notice. Thank you very much.
No problem. If I have time, I'm always available. When you told me what you was talking about, and I realized, he's right. They're not talking about this.
Yeah. Let me just tell you, and to me, this is why, you are the number one guy we could have on in the country. And it really speaks to how someone like Joe Paterno can get away with what he got away with for so long. I'm not talking about the gravity of the situation right now, but the fact that nobody at it's not anywhere on ESPN.com. It's like the 5th story on the college football page. And you've got these players invoking Jerry Sandusky, right? And this is coming off another situation, a big situation that Franklin was involved with off the field, with pushing players to come back when they were hurt. And Robert, I wanted to get your opinion on this, but when I think about the lawsuit and this player's now at Cal, he's a young kid, he's trying to make his way and maybe to the league, but it took a lot of courage. I don't think people realize it took a lot of courage to come out and do this. He could be blackballed, of course. That's the way that sport is. That's the way sports is. But for the precise reason that ESPN will ignore this, that's why these things are happening. So I got to give kudos to that kid. What are your thoughts about them not covering it?
Well, my first thing is that it was mind-boggling to me that Penn State, out of all of the schools in this country, right, would be the one that would even remotely have anything, like this. You would think when they would, the first day at camp or the first day that these kids come in, they would say, hey, listen, our reputation is in the trash for this. let's not have any type of hazing, any type of this type of stuff. This is just not happening at Penn State. So I was shocked by it. Now, as far as ESPN and covering it, like you said, there's been cover-ups in the past, with Penn State, and it wasn't them that exposed it in the first place. I don't know. It's a public lawsuit. To my understanding, TMZ just got the lawsuit, from a public
that
record.
says it all.
Yeah, so it's not like it's something like it's a rumor or someone's off the record or anything. It's on record. It's a lawsuit that's going forward. TMZ was able to get comments from Penn State, so I'm assuming ESPN could get both sides of the story and then can reach out and read the thing. It just seems like there are certain issues when it comes to ESPN under their new leadership that they just don't want to tackle head on. Now, if it's something about Odell Beckham or Antonio Brown or something like that, then that's fine. But with certain topics, even we saw it a little bit with the Julian Edelman arrest. They didn't really kind of go into that. They just seem to be hands off with it. And I don't know if that's because of the new leadership there or some new mantra, but they're just very careful about some of the things they say and some of the things they report now.
I mean, there's nobody that's followed sports media stories every day, every minute of the day over the last decade at least than you, literally. And you trade your business is much about filling in the gaps,
right,
reporting stuff that nobody else reports. And so I hear you say that there may be kind of a change with ESPN. I absolutely think that there's a change. I mean, all you have to do is look at Bob Lee. E60 is gone. Mm-hmm. Now they're saying to you, right, before we were pretending this was kind of reality and we would catch up if we had to. Now they're just like, screw it. We're not going to do anything that will. It's all about business. It's all about maintaining our relationships with the conferences, with the teams, with the leagues. That's it. Do you think this is new?
Yeah, well, I think, like you said, I think it's kind of just out there in the open now, and it's one of those type of things when you have
to you and me, it is.
Yeah,
that's the problem. Other people, I don't think know that.
Yeah, when you have a relationship, this goes on. Remember Playmakers? The show that they did on ESPN that was about the NFL and what was going on behind the scenes, and the NFL nixed it. Because to me, that was when I first realized that ESPN, is just a leg. And if someone pulls on it enough, they can make decisions. HBO is like, hey, we're going to make Ballers. But they don't have any affiliation with the NFL, so they couldn't do anything, about it. So what it does, it makes you question all of the reporting. And then what happens is because now so much of their main stars are just kind of entertainment based. Like it's all of the hot takes. It's all about going viral and stuff like that. Everything is blurry. So when they do try to take on a real news story, you have to question some of the validity behind it or what is the motive behind it. And, I mentioned this the other day when I was watching the national championship game. They've literally gotten rid of people for talking about Donald Trump in honest and accurate terms. But when Donald Trump wants to come on the field, they made sure to give him, 5 minutes of him walking out there for big production, about it. But then they go back and then they tell their people, hey, you can't talk bad about Trump on social media, on your shows or anything. There's a hypocrisy that is definitely there and showing a lot more, I guess, than it used to be.
Now, I think that there's something to be said for the current situation with Trump as president. One of the things that's interesting to me is when Trump was at Alabama and he got the reception, CBS basically covered the whole thing up. And we played the, and look, I think that's one of the reasons a guy like Trump's president, because you're doing a lot of what he's doing, the dishonest, covering up basically that he's there, not acknowledging him, more specifically, not acknowledging him the way you would acknowledge a president. That's really weird that you barely show him.
Yeah.
And so ESPN, I'm not defending ESPN in any way. I will say this, though. If George W. Bush or Bill Clinton was president, don't you think the coverage probably would have been about the same? I mean, I don't really think it's
it's not that the coverage is not the same because, President Obama would do the Final Four and stuff like that. The problem is that the coverage would be the same, but the talent is not allowed to speak freely on it. They've literally gotten rid of talent because they said something negative about it. They've put people on air to go against Colin Kaepernick and not go against the president. You can talk all you want about Colin Kaepernick. You can say this, and the other. But if you say, hey, maybe the president shouldn't call, NFL players sons of bitches. That's not really their majority black players and things like that. If you say that, they literally have a mantra that you cannot do it. Like, you just can't do it. But when it benefits them, then it's okay. So if you could talk about Colin Kaepernick's political affiliation or other people's political affiliation, but if I say, hey, if ESPN said, why aren't you mentioning, Nick Bosa and his political affiliation in regards to the draft, when you're talking about all of these other players and their quote unquote red flags, why can't we talk about that? They say, oh, well, we don't get into that. So it's not so much that the coverage wouldn't be the same, is that I don't feel like it's fair that it's only one way. It's only one side. You're not allowed to tell the other side.
Visit with Rob Littell of TMZ Sports and Black Sports Online. And really, I don't know how you look at it personally, but I've said this for a while, and I've said it to Evan a bunch of times, tweeted it out. And it's ironic because, you get this label about TMZ that it's somehow this loose, crazy thing. Let me tell you, TMZ Sports and what you do, it's the exact opposite. And you mentioned it before. I'm saying these things, but what do you have? What do we talk about? Like, what does Adam Schefter tweet about all week? Gossipy stuff or low hanging fruit that AB did something stupid, right? What? By the way, why is he doing something stupid? Because Sean Payton brings him in afterwards. Because Bill Belichick, the two standard bearer coaches who are these men of honor and glory. And we're seeing him in promos in the 100. And Sean Payton has this great reputation. I'm not saying he's a bad guy, but who are the guys after all this stuff, right? Sean Payton brings him in. Are they holding Sean Payton accountable? Did anybody really say much of anything? No, they just swept it under the rug. So, I mean, we've gotten to a point where do you look at your role differently, that you always looked at it as, I'm doing stories nobody else is doing. And this matters. This matters to what's happening on the field. But has that kind of responsibility heightened in your mind, and in a way that you now look at stories and say, basically, Robert, we're deciding this is important, because if nobody else is going to do it and it is important, we're going to do it and we're going to tell you. I mean, is that thought process different for you than it was 10 years ago?
I find it interesting is that, like what you said, the things that we were doing 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 4 years ago, the stuff that they used to call us, oh, you guys are just bloggers, you don't have any credibility, this is just gossip, it's all of this stuff. All of that stuff that they used to talk down to us about is their core stuff that they do right now. And I'm talking about the mainstream media, the ESPN, the SIs, the Yahoo Sports. That's their core stuff now. That's the stuff that's moving the needle, Me, I find that so ironic. But secondly, the things that I have always said is that it's important to me that people have every single perspective of a story, every single perspective of an athlete or a coach or a GM and things like that. So I think that's where I fill in the gaps now. Like, if you want to talk about Drew Brees, that's fine. But, if Drew Brees is doing PSAs for religious hate groups and hanging out with Donald Trump, then or taking pictures with Donald Trump, you should know that. You should have that information with you. I'm not saying that you shouldn't or should not be a Drew Brees fan, but I think it's important that people know, hey, this is a guy that talked badly about Colin Kaepernick, that does these things. So when you're making your assessment or whatever, you should know this. And I think that's the thing. And so when people come in and say, hey, they have 9 stories about Odell Beckham at the LSU national championship game, dancing, giving out money, slapping cops, but they got a half a story about Julian Edelman actually getting arrested for acting a fool in Beverly Hills. I think it's my job to point out, hey, these things aren't equal. So, if the situations were reversed, if that was Gronk celebrating with LSU and dancing and doing all this stuff, it would be seen as funny and entertaining. And if it was Odell Beckham jumping on a car in Hollywood, it would be the front page story on the New York Daily News, New York Post, and everything. So it's just my job, I think, at this point in my career, it's just to call out the hypocrisy as I see it within the mainstream media. And thankfully, people like yourself and others give me a platform to actually do that.
Yeah. We're visiting with Robert Littell. He's on FS1 every night now. Thank God, on TMZ Sports over there with Evan Rosenblum and all the great people over there. And of course, Black Sports Online, BSO on Twitter. It's an essential follow. If you're a sports fan, you don't have a choice. You need to do it. But now I'm so glad I have you because, and we talked to Jamel Hill about this a while ago on the show because it broke about the same time. But when we found out that Stephen A. Smith had gone on another podcast or it was another show and revealed that he had played, and I totally believe him, an instrumental role in making the Kaepernick Atlanta workout happen. In other words, he's going to, probably the best known sports media figure, African-American media figure, but just period in the country is telling, it sounds like he had a conversation to the point where he said, I'll give you all cover, right? I'll give you all cover if you do this thing. Don't worry about me. Maybe it was like that, but he goes and reveals on another platform, something he never did on ESPN, that yes, I played an instrumental role with Jay-Z in making this happen, right? And then after the Kaepernick thing happens, I don't know if you remember, he went berserk. Now he goes berserk a lot, but it seemed a little bit overboard that he was really, really mad and really, really vicious at Kaepernick. And of course, that makes sense now once you find out that he set it up. But he never ever told us that he set it up. So what are your thoughts about that?
One of the things about Stephen A. Smith is that I think Stephen A. Smith is the most prominent person that they have at ESPN right now. And so by default, that makes him the most prominent African-American journalist, reporter, or sports personality, whatever you want to call him, probably in this country. So I hope he realizes this. So everything he says and everything that he does has a wide-reaching effect. He has a lot of power in the things that he says and the things that he does. So if you are a reporter or a journalist or whatever you want to call it, and you are working with a league to help someone or you're involved in that situation, that's a very, very slippery slope. Because now as a consumer, I'm watching you, it makes me wonder where your allegiances are. Are you working with the league? Because if you're working with the league and you're also in the media, then that kind of taints what you're saying on your shows. Because it's like, well, you work with the league, you did this with the league, so you're not going to bash the league over it if you were involved in it. I think at some point, we've gotten to this point where everybody's entertainers. And everybody, I'm not saying everybody is on the take, but everybody has these sides or in pockets and all of this stuff. And it makes it very difficult when those shows come out and these people are giving their opinions to take these opinions as unbiased because they have vested interests in various sides. So with Stephen A. Smith, I think it's even bigger because whatever side he takes, a lot of people are going to attach to that. So when he attacked initially Colin Kaepernick, you saw all the people that don't like Colin Kaepernick hop on that train. You saw people that don't look like me say, well,
they're on the fence.
As a black person doesn't like what Kaepernick did,
right,
then how can I, be, racist or whatever it could be? So it muddies the waters, and that's not something that we really want.
And interesting thing, hearing you say that, I don't know about you, but you're literally, it's like you're not allowed to bring up Kaepernick. Mm-hmm. People just dismiss it like it's some sort of illegitimate subject. And I think what you just described is one of the reasons. It's the general climate right now. And you have to have courage. You got to bring it up anyway. You got to be able to zoom out but I think what you just described probably contributes to the lack of dialogue in a legitimate way about Colin Kaepernick. Folks, as if it's not important, as if blackballing a good player. And the other thing that I think is tragic is I know people in my personal life that are white who just is still in the media and all over social media telling me that it's Colin Kaepernick's just not good enough. They actually have gotten to the point where they have heard that, whether it's from Stephen A. or whomever, right? And now they actually believe something that really is totally untrue, justifying something that couldn't be more un-American. And I mean, when Stephen A. Smith has an opinion on something, and we know now what it is. To me, my impression, Robert, is he's going to do whatever is pragmatic, because sometimes he comes off as a little conservative. He'll be on that old school, old fashioned side, when it suits him and when it suits ESPN. I don't think he projects really anything coherent. But among the Black community, African American community, when he has an opinion on, let's say, a serious subject, do you think that is taken seriously? Do you think that is more likely to make that opinion more popular in the African American community?
Yes, I do. I mean, he's the biggest voice. So when you have the biggest voice in the room, whatever you say is going to have an effect. Now, we live in this society now where we can't seem to focus on anything more than a day or two. So what he say may have a negative effect for a couple of days, and he say something positive and people are back on the team and whatever it may be. But I think one thing that I had to learn, and I have a much smaller, reach, but it's still a reach. So even sometimes when I'm thinking about saying certain things, maybe I don't agree with something that Colin Kaepernick did, or maybe I don't agree with something somebody else. I have to be very careful in how I word that, because like I said, the one thing that you don't want is while you're trying to have a reasonable discussion, right? Because when you have a reasonable, just because you're Black doesn't mean that you're right all the time. Right. And it's just, you could be wrong, but you have to, in this climate, it's very difficult to have those reasonable discussions without people coming up behind you that have all of the wrong intentions or say, hey, see, BSO, he's Black Sports Online. He has a problem with Colin Kaepernick. He has a problem with such and such. So I agree with that. I'm telling you, so it can't be, we can't be racist. They can't be blackballing them and stuff. I just think as journalists in 2020, we have a responsibility to be very, very careful at how we put out our critiques on things when the bigger picture is, regardless if we don't agree with a little thing here or a little thing there, we know that someone's being blackballed or someone's being discriminated against or the media is doing something wrong. So even if we like someone or we dislike someone, we have to be very careful with how we present those points.
Most people, in my opinion, if they're educated, they're paying attention to what's going on, they do a little thinking, are moderate. It just depends on the situation, but they don't automatically eliminate one side or the other. Yet I think people think that way much more so, I think, right now, for whatever reason. But it really pisses me off. I want to give you an analogy, because I think there's people that white people, in the way they look at a Black person like Howard Bryant, right? They think Howard Bryant is a guy who's this constant activist guy. But if you follow Howard Bryant and you read his books, no one could be more moderate than him. Yeah. Howard Bryant is trying to come together with all parties. No one is more if you follow him, he is not the way, of course, he's portrayed that way. But I'll give you a quick, maybe this is an inappropriate example, maybe it is, but I read a book called Sundown Towns, and it's about in the North how thousands of cities, and this happened up until the 1960s, throughout the country, would put up these signs saying, Black people, you need to leave at sundown. And this was all over the country. It's been covered up. It's been hidden, right? And this guy went out and wrote a book about it, and he talked to people about the situation. Why are no people living in Appleton, Wisconsin? And the response he would get to this day is, well, Black people don't like cold weather. That's BS. That's not true. That you drove them out, you murdered them. You did all of these things, right? And so it's the same principle, I think, whether it's a white nationalist or Black person, whatever it is, we automatically put them over here and make something up, right, to keep them. And that's why we can't have a conversation. And this circles all the way back. I don't want to, I'm filibustering here, I know, but I want to circle. It's funny because the reason we brought you on really is the subject of what we're talking about this whole time and other issues, and that's Penn State. And so what is your approach on this Penn State? It's a serious story. So what are you and Evan thinking? How are you guys going to cover this? And what do you think might play out?
Well, I mean, they are the ones that tracked down the lawsuit and brought it to light, which they do with a lot of stories. I don't think they get enough credit, just to talk about TMZ just for a little bit, because I think this is a good point that you make. Like, everyone in that building, I'm pretty sure that the political leanings and things of that nature, I wouldn't agree with. But the one thing that is important, I think, is that you get inside of those type of buildings. And one of the things that I asked Evan, from the beginning was like, hey, if I come in and I come on, I have to be me. I can't be a watered down version of Robert Littal. I can't be a puppet. I can't, you got to let me say what I want to say, like the same way I say it online, the same way I say it on my site, the same way I say it on your show and everything. And one of the things he told me right from the jump, he's like, we wouldn't bring you in to be somebody.
That's why you're on there. That's why you're on there.
Yeah. We want you to be yourself. That's why we want you on there, is to bring some balance, to what's happening. And I think that's what I do, or try to do for the most part. But I will say that they get to things that other people just don't get to. And they got to this Penn State thing. And I think what's happening is people don't want to give them credit for it. But and this is a big if, because Penn State has said it didn't happen the way that the guy said that it happened. But once again, that's part of research. That's part of development. But if any of it is true, like even if 10, 15% of it is true, with their history, you would think that heads would roll. But it just seems like it's just not important to mainstream media right now. And I don't know if it's because it's black kids, talking about other black kids, hazing them and saying they're going to do things to them, as opposed to coaches or administrative, or it's not a Me Too situation where it's a female and an athlete. I believe that if this was a lawsuit, like say from a woman saying that the Penn State football players were doing X, Y, and Z to her, it would be a much bigger story. But because there's this kind of macho thing where guys shouldn't say these things about other guys and all of this stuff, I think it's being, swept under the rug. But the one thing you can know from TMZ's side is that if it's more to it, they're going to find it at some point.
Yeah, right. Dude, you just hit the nail. Oh, man, you knocked it out of the park when you said if this was a female, if this was a gymnast. And I think that really, really underlines how ESPN is deliberately suppressing this. The only way that James Franklin, if he is involved, is going to be held accountable will be if it comes from an outside media outlet. And an outside media outlet like a CNN is, to me, much more likely to get into a story if it involves a female, regardless. I mean, ESPN's not going to cover that either, right? For the most part. I don't think it's going to. Now it's all gone. E60, everything's gone now. I think ESPN has this ubiquitous approach. But if it's a female, that may pop up, on CNN, MSNBC. And then they're going to catch up and it becomes. But what about a football player? And what about a situation involving James Franklin, who, forget about that he's African-American. I don't think that's a huge thing. He's being protected by ESPN on purpose for whatever reason. And just like they protected Joe Paterno. Right. And they created Joe Paterno. Joe Paterno wasn't this transcendent coach. Sandusky was the transcendent. I mean, Joe, you remember, Joe would go 7-4 and 8-3. Okay, is he going to, ESPN invented this guy with the glasses and the icon and all that stuff. And I see the same thing happening right now. And man, I can't thank you enough for how you guys approach it. I can't encourage you enough. Not that you need it, Jesus. Unbelievable job. And I can't thank you enough for coming on and giving us, it's not another perspective. It's a perspective that a lot of people watching and listening don't know. And if they care about what happens on the field, right, and if they care about Joe Paterno, they have to watch TMZ Sports. They got to pay attention. It's kind of all of our duty if we know what's going out there. So I really appreciate it.
Oh man, no problem at all. Like I said, it's the good thing now is that people like myself and you, we didn't have as all of these different platforms that we have now. We didn't have them 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Now it's much harder for them to sweep stuff under the rug because there's enough of us out there that's going to say, hey, we see what you're doing. We're putting it out there. You're going to have to address it at some time. We see your hypocrisy as well. So I think as long as we keep doing what we're doing, keep fighting a good fight, people are going to see the truth. about certain things. And like you said, in the end, then they're forced to actually cover the stuff that needs to be covered.
And you're like the post office. It's like I go and I check BSO. Like there's 2 or 3 things that I check every morning, right? Whether it's for the show or I've been out, just so you know, not that there's a lot of people out there that do that. So we're all like, you're really the anchor of a lot of people's lives and how they follow sports, man. It's awesome. So
thank you. I appreciate you having me on as always. As long as I'm here in my office, you can get a hold of me.
And please give Evan and the whole gang over there. And man, you guys are killing it and keep doing it. And we'll talk to you soon, Robert. Thanks.
All right. Have a good one.
That's Robert Littau, Black Sports Online, BSO on Twitter and on TMZ Sports. And I'm telling you, I don't want to embarrass him while he's with me, but I've been watching that show a lot. I mean, I watched that show because I want to know what's actually going to happen in sports a little bit before it happens, because they cover things that are being completely ignored. But wait a minute, they're relevant to betting lines, what they're covering, but the networks aren't covering it. So, but man, he is coming into his own on TV. I'm telling you right now. And you know, and I said this about myself. I wouldn't have a career. I wouldn't have the website. I wouldn't be doing this show had it not been in the past for me having opportunities to break stories or present stories in such a way that is relevant to betting lines. It's relevant to who's on the field, right? That's what I'm doing. You might think, oh, I'm doing gossip over here. No, I'm not. The stories may look like it, but I mean, AB, that may look like a stupid dummy story that doesn't, well, not to Sean Payton, who just signed him or whatever. You know, he didn't just sign him. I mean, but brought him in. I mean, think about this. This is something to ponder. I mean, there's so much to talk about. That's why I really appreciate this show, because I you know, and that's why I was kind of born to do a talk show, I guess you could say, because everything I see, I automatically start to assess, you know, and articulate to myself. But when you see somebody like Sean Payton bringing in Antonio Brown, and it's reported like everything else, right? But we're led to believe that Antonio Brown is this monster. Now, is he a bad guy? You bet your ass he is. He's an idiot, a jackass, and maybe worse. We don't know. But the only reason he's doing that stuff is Sean Payton, John Gruden, Bill Belichick, period. It's not Antonio Brown. It's them. Antonio Brown wouldn't be doing those things. And of course, Drew Rosenhaus, his agent. That's what this is all about. And it's not a coincidence that it's Belichick and it's Payton, 2 of the top coaches who win consistently, right? Because that's how it happens. That's how you make things. You've got to be bloodless in how you evaluate talent. You've got to be pragmatic, at least in their mind, and then you can achieve what he's achieved. I'm not saying he won it with a bunch of bad guys, but to bring in Antonio Brown and for people to not make a big deal of that after they were making a big deal out of it for the prior 3 weeks with the Raiders, which was a total joke and a disaster and embarrassing. What happened with Mayock, what happened with Groot, unbelievable. So, you know, Robert and Evan, the thing about those guys is they don't care what ESPN is doing because they know ESPN won't acknowledge what they're doing. And so they're going to do the story if it's a story. And I'm trying to think. So the one last thing I want to mention is, and I didn't get to, but we'll talk about this tomorrow because I'll have some intel on it, just about what's going on and how it all happened. And I mentioned this, I think, to John McClain. Joe Brady going to the Panthers, right? Leaving LSU. Cam Smith, our producer, I know you know how big a story that is. That, I think, besides Joe Burrow's performance, LSU winning the national title, Joe Brady leaving to go to the Panthers, that's probably the second biggest story in college football, will be this year. And we're really going to find out about Coach O here shortly. But that's an enormous story, and it should be a lead story. And I can't believe it hasn't been. And he's going to make $2 million as the offensive coordinator for the Panthers. So we will be back tomorrow, and we have Andrew Marchand of the New York Post will probably be with us, depending on breaking news. And we've got some other irons in the fire. It's going to be very interesting. So come back, and I'll talk more about USC. I didn't get into it all that. I actually didn't get into it much at all. So we'll talk about that noon Eastern time, 9 Pacific. Do it every weekday. Thanks to Cam Smith, our producer, everybody at Fancred. And this is Brooks Melchior from Los Angeles saying so long. This has been Sports by Brooks on Fancred.